The temple in Jerusalem that Jesus enters in this gospel passage was, in many ways, the culmination of over 1,000 years of struggle and strife. If you go through and start reading the Old Testament from the very beginning, as a small group of us are doing in Wednesday evening, the people of Israel start by dragging the temple with them. It was a tent. And as they moved from place to place, they would build the temple back up, and there were very strict rules on how you were to reconstruct it and what things went where and who was supposed to be involved. Thousands of people gave their lives to protect the temple over the centuries. There was a first temple built by Solomon, which was destroyed, and this was a second one. And it was a wonder to behold. It was incredible. It took 46. It was still under construction. It took 46 years to build. It would be as if we began building something in 1969, and it was still under construction today. And what building other than Union Station in Toronto has that kind of legacy? Zing. It was an amazement. And all the people in Jerusalem were incredibly proud of it. And of course, there were Jews all over the Mediterranean at this time, and a lot of them spoke Greek. And for a lot of them, they would wait till the end of their lives, and they would say goodbye to their families, and they would begin the long trek, sometimes from thousands of miles away, to the temple. It was a pilgrimage, and they would visit God's house, and then shortly thereafter, they would die. And that was something that people did all throughout the world, the Jewish world at that time. And this is the temple that Jesus enters. And imagine the power of this story of the people of Israel following finally of the Son of God incarnate, finally coming into the temple. If this is a movie, he would be on his knees and he would weep. And it would be this wonderful moment, right? This wonderful Hollywood moment. But of course, that's not what happens at all, right? What actually happens is Jesus enters the temple, his Father's house, and he is devastated by what's happening. He sees corruption. He sees rampant it's not so much capitalism, but there's money, there's corruption, there's power. All of the things that have perhaps corrupted ancient Rome have corrupted this temple, and he's devastated, and he essentially throws everybody out, and as much as he can do as one man, he closes the temple. He closes the church. This gospel presents us with a paradox that, on one hand, everything about our faith is wrapped in story and history. Our faith is known through the story of the people of Israel and through the story of Jesus and his disciples. But at the very same time, this is also the story. Sorry, we're okay. Okay. Excellent. All right. On one hand, it's a story. The scriptures are told to us in story. We learn about God through story. At the very same time, Jesus is utterly uninterested in the history of this place, and he is completely interested in whether or not this place is bearing fruit, whether or not something of the Spirit is being done in this place. And since there was no fruit born out of this temple, Jesus had utterly no interest in it. The parable that we hear in I think all of the Gospels is that of a fig tree. It's a weird story. Jesus goes out, right before visiting the temple, Jesus goes to a fig tree, and he wants to get some fruit, and there's no fruit on the tree. And so he curses the tree and says, "Curse you, tree, you don't have any more fruit, you're no longer in season," right? And then he goes into the temple, and then he comes back out, and the tree has died. It's a weird story, but it's an allegory for the temple. The temple has ceased to bear fruit. And so Jesus says we need to destroy this temple and rebuild a new one. What does it mean that the single criteria, perhaps, that God would use to evaluate a church is whether or not it bears fruit? To bear fruit means two things. One, it means that those animals that live amidst the tree are fed. To bear fruit means that the people are fed. And it also means that you are bearing seeds for the next generation. What does it mean for us that God may not be particularly interested in the history of the church and much more interested in whether or not right now, in this place and in this time, the love of God can be found? I think we live in a world where perhaps, unlike any other time, perhaps since the church began, I believe that many people are in concordance with this. We're living in a world today where a lot of people are not particularly interested in what denomination of church they go to. A lot of people say, oh, you're an Anglican church. Ah, the legacy of the Church of England. I must go there. What a wonderful history. We don't hear that. People go to Protestant, to Catholic churches, to evangelical churches. I don't think people particularly care what denomination it is, as long as they are fed, they are loved, they are welcomed, and they encounter something holy and sacred from time to time. I believe that's what people are looking for. I'm not convinced anymore. There's a lot of things that churches tell one another. I think I'll probably say more than most people in this city. I'd say, it's the problem that churches have to wrestle with is that people aren't churched anymore. They don't know a lot about churches. They don't know a lot about, they haven't gone to church since they were kids. They don't know. I'm not sure that I buy that. I think people know very well when they are loved. I think people know when they're welcome. I don't think you need a rigorous confirmation education to know when you walk through a church whether or not you are loved. I think that's our responsibility and call. It's an incredible gift. It's an incredible gift to inherit a legacy, yes, but to be in a time and a place where it doesn't matter what the ancient history of our church is, people are drawn to love and to community. As an allegory for that, I've been thinking a lot about my grandfather. Brian showed me the minutes of the 1973 diocesan synod. And in that, there's a motion that's seconded by my grandfather. And I don't know too much about my grandfather's legacy in this diocese. He was a priest here for over 30 years. But what was remarkable about this motion was I completely disagreed with it. And I disagreed with Brian in 1973. I think Brian disagrees with Brian in 1973. Completely disagree with it. And it really, I've been thinking about it ever since. Because there's so much about my grandfather as a priest that I don't know about. And I know that, not to get into family politics in the pulpit, but I know that my dad and my grandpa didn't agree a lot on a lot of things in church stuff. And yet, what I remember and what is true for me is that I was loved by my grandpa. He loved me, and I loved him. He was an awesome grandpa. I probably disagreed with so many things that he did as a priest. But what is true for me is that he loved me, and he gave great Christmas presents. And that's what's true. That's the truth for me about him. That's who he was. He was a loving man, and he was awesome. And I feel that this is the gift that we are given as a church. I don't think it's a wonderful gift that people don't particularly care what the ancient legacy of the church is. They just want to know, is this church going to give good cookies? Does the coffee taste good? Are the people going to be loving? Are they going to pray with me? Are they going to visit me when I'm sick in the hospital? Is this place going to bear fruit? Or is it not? That's how God will evaluate this church. That's how our community evaluates us. That's how we evaluate ourselves. That's our health as a parish. It's not this great ancient story that we have that is wonderful and it gives us an enormous sense of identity and meaning, but who we are is how much we love one another and how much we love God, and how much we show it. And we get to start over every new generation. We get the gift of redefining ourselves, like my grandpa could just completely redefine himself in a way to me. And his legacy is a legacy of love and awesome Christmas presents. And I hope that's our legacy too as a church. Amen.